Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Hope you're staying cool and wishing you a happy Pride Month. My name is Megan Wynn, and I'm the Community Events Manager at the Peninsula Open Space Trust, and I'll be your host for tonight. You're watching Queer is Natural, hosted by Post, featuring our special guest, Dr. Christine Wilkinson, who I will introduce to you very soon. In the lush garden of nature, queerness blooms like a fabulous flower. It flips the script on traditional narratives of what's natural, rewriting them with extra flair. Over the next hour together tonight, we'll take a mini dive into queer ecology before exploring specific species examples. Thank you for joining us tonight for this special program and celebrating Pride Month and the beauty of queerness in nature. Tonight's presentation will be interactive and we welcome your participation. You'll need to log into YouTube to ask your questions in the live chat. We will take your questions throughout the presentation and at the end, and answer questions submitted by viewers like you during the registration process. And here's a pro tip. You can watch directly on YouTube or click full screen if you're on the Post website for the best viewing experience. This recording will also be available on YouTube. Please follow the community chat guidelines so that we can create a positive, inclusive environment tonight. Please be kind, no harmful speech, foster constructive discussions, do not spam or promote yourself on the chat, and we reserve the right to remove any comments. Additionally, we have a small content warning. This event tonight will contain ample discussion of sexual behavior in the non-human animal kingdom. Some information may be deemed PG-13, so viewer discretion is advised. For those of you who are new to Post work, we are a nonprofit land trust, and our mission is to protect open spaces on the peninsula and South Bay for the benefit of all. We are creating a network of protected lands where people and nature connect and thrive. Since 1977, Post has protected over 87,000 acres of land. And give it up, y'all. Here is a short 30-second video on what we do.
Since our founding in 1977, Post and our partners have preserved the peninsula and South Bay's sweeping landscapes.
These are the places we know and love.
Places that wildlife call home.
Places we rely on for food, fresh air, clean water, and our health.
We're just getting started. Post protects nature because nature sustains us. Nature connects us all.
You can learn more about Post on our website at openspacetrust.org. We host many free events every month, as well as share free resources like our hiking guides if you are looking for recommendations on where to go in the South Bay and Peninsula. Check out the link in the chat. Before we dive into the program, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement and invite you to share what native land you are currently occupying and tuning in from today in the chat. The land in Post working area includes the territories of the Amah Mutsun, Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush Ohlone, Tamia Nation, as well as other native organizations and individuals who are descended from the first people of this land. These lands have been home to many native tribes since time immemorial and whose people are still here with us today. I want to acknowledge the land itself, including the Santa Cruz and Diablo Mountains, the San Francisco Bay, and the Pacific Ocean, as well as all the watersheds and ecosystems that make up this landscape we call our home. Thank you, and keep typing in the chat. Let this moment serve as a reminder that as residents of this place, we have a responsibility to be caretakers of our shared home and neighbors, including wildlife. All right, folks, if you're new around here, I have a special surprise and fun activity for us tonight. It's time to play the Queer is Natural Quiz Game Show! All right, players, it's time to play the Queer is Natural Quiz Game Show. Here's how this is going to work and how you can participate from home. You'll need to log in and scan this code with your phone or log into menti.com and enter the code on screen. If you don't want to play interactively, that's fine. You can play along to yourself in your living room or wherever you're watching this, or type in the live chat, however you want to participate. But it's extra fun when you can join all the viewers watching live. Go ahead and enter that code. I'll wait a few more seconds and then we'll get this show started. All right. Okay, I'm seeing some people coming in. Here we go. Keep logging in. We'll wait a few more seconds here. And let's test your knowledge. This game show quiz was created from information from Dr. Christine's research, as well as just knowledge of the queer ecology. So let's dive in. And once I keep going, you'll have more chances to log in. So with that being said, let's start with question number 1. All right. Okay, question 1. Same-sex sexual behavior has likely evolved largely for social reasons in which animal taxa? Is it reptiles, birds, mammals, or amphibians? All right, you are already typing in your answers. Looks like mammals is winning, but don't let them sway you. You know, stick to what you know and what you think. Go ahead and make your best guess. And we are going to show the answer in a few seconds here, but I'm going to wait a few more. Thank you for all these live reactions here. I'm loving the energy. Let's keep it up and see how well your knowledge is. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The correct answer is mammals. So if you selected that, good job. You are a winner. Let's learn a little bit more about that. In 2023, Jose Gomez and colleagues published a paper in Nature Communications that demonstrated that same-sex sexual behavior evolved multiple times across mammal lineages, yet is particularly prevalent in clades with social species. So, good job if you selected mammals. Let's stay on this roll. Okay, question number 2. Get ready, players. Which close relative to humans is famous for their intensive use of sexual activity, both same-sex and hetero, to prevent and resolve conflicts? Is it gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, or bonobos? And wow, even before I finished reading the question, we already had some eager beavers selecting the answer. So bonobos is in the lead, but you know, again, don't let them sway you. Take your best guess. I'll wait a few more seconds. Here we go. All right. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we're going to reveal the right answer here. And if you selected bonobos, you are correct. Bonobos are generally much less violent than chimpanzees, which could be linked to bonobos' peacemaking sexual behavior. Bonobos also have a matriarchal social structure, which is unusual among primates. All right, give it up. Good job, y'all. You guys are pretty much 2 for 2, so let's go for question number 3. What species is comprised entirely of females and is also a New Mexico state reptile? Is it the Gila monster, the desert tortoise, New Mexico whiptail lizard, or the horned lizard? Go ahead and lock in your answers. And let me check out this live chat to see how we're doing over here. Okay. Here we go. Lock in your answers. Oh, this one's more split. Okay, Gila monster is in the lead, followed by New Mexico whiptail lizard second, and a few more answers for horned lizard and desert tortoise. I'm going to wait a few more seconds before I advance to the next question. Let's keep going. Okay, now they're tied. Let's see if we can emerge a final leader. It is really split here. Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is the New Mexico whiptail lizard. New Mexico whiptail lizards reproduce via parthenogenesis. However, they are able to maintain genetic diversity or heterozygosity by creating twice the usual number of chromosomes and recombining them during this process. That one almost got you, but half of y'all got it right, so good job to you. All right. Next question. Approximately what percentage of white-tailed deer are born intersex? Is it 6, 10, 13, or 21%? Go ahead and lock in those answers here and let's see how well you know white-tailed deer and intersection. Okay. All right. It's looking pretty much even across the board except for 13% is up there. I hope you guys aren't Googling these questions, by the way. But we'll reveal it in a few seconds. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you answered 13%, which is the winner in this round, you would be correct. Good job, everybody. Let's learn a little bit more. These deer, termed velvet horns colloquially, never shed the velvet on their horns, as most males do after their first year of life. Velvet horns have bodies that are closer to a doe's. They can't reproduce, and they sometimes form velvet horn societies or have been observed adapting orphan fawns. Fun fact, Bambi is a white-tailed deer. Okay, folks, here's the very last question on our game show. Good luck. Observe same-sex sexual behavior in which animal species in California in the 1970s galvanized new conversations around the naturalness of homosexuality? Is it sea otters, the western gull, California condor, or the mountain lion? Wow, and immediately out the gate, someone answered western gull, and that is winning, but you never know. So go ahead and make that educated guess based on what you know, what you think, and we will reveal the final answer very soon. Okay, right now we got a battle between sea otters and western gull. Keep locking in those answers, y'all. And we'll go from there. Okay. All right, here we go. First answer, sea otters. Second answer, western gull. Revealing the answer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It is the western gull. Good job to you 69 folks who answered that correctly. Researchers realized that a large percentage, about 14% of the western gulls on a small island off the coast of California were female-female pairs, successfully raising supernormal or very large clutches of eggs to fledgling. All right, that concludes our game show. Give yourselves a round of applause for playing, and thank you for indulging me in that game. All right, let me transition back to our little program here and take off my jacket. But I hope you enjoyed that. That's the benefit of watching our shows live, because we do like interactive and components. And if you're watching online and the recording, we hope you also learn something new as well. Okay, let me just get off stage here and get back into this lush forest. Okay, so let's get this show started. I'm going to introduce you to our speaker tonight. Dr. Christine Wilkinson is a conservation scientist and science communicator based at UC Berkeley and the California Academy of Sciences. Her work focuses on the social, ecological drivers of human-wildlife interactions and how our relationships with nature are underpinned by environmental justice. Christine earned her doctorate degree in environmental science, policy, and management from UC Berkeley, and currently conducts research on conservation outreach in Nakuru County, Kenya, and the Bay Area. She is a National Geographic explorer, co-founder of Black Mammalogists Week, director of the Humans and Hyenas Alliance, and creator of a popular social media series called Queer is Natural, about queerness in the natural world. Let's welcome Dr. Christine to the stage. Hey, Dr. Christine, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here tonight. Before we dive into the main content, can you tell us about how you started your Queer is Natural series and your science journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually grew up in Queens, New York. So I was a bit of a city kid, and I got really into urban animals. So I loved cockroaches and squirrels, and I loved rats, believe it or not. So I've kind of always been into misunderstood or kind of weird animals. So for Queer is Natural, I started that in 2022 in honor of Pride Month, just to put some info out there about all the science we have, about all the cool stuff that we don't get to talk about enough.
Wow, thank you. Well, happy 2-year anniversary to Queer is Natural, and we're so excited that you could be here celebrating Pride Month and that anniversary with us tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll talk about today?
Yeah, for sure. So I will mostly be diving into some great examples of queerness in the animal kingdom specifically, as well as some theories we have about how queerness pops up in the animal kingdom. And then at the end, we'll get into a little bit what the reactions have been to Queer is Natural, both good and bad, and what that might mean for us.
All right. Well, we can't wait. A reminder to our live audience, if you want to ask your questions or comments, you'll need to log into YouTube to participate. And we'll bring up the questions at the end during the Q&A session and answer questions submitted by viewers like you. All right, Dr. Christine, let's get your slides up and go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, y'all. Thanks again for having me. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm suffering from hay fever right now. So if something happens, I might like pause and you talk amongst yourselves as I blow my nose or something really gross. So anyway, we are animals too. So that's your lesson in that. And I'm going to dive into a bunch of queer nature stuff today. I'm going to be focusing on the animal kingdom because that's where I kind of have my expertise in general. I'm a wildlife ecologist. But I just want to put a note in to let you know there's actually a lot more to explore than just the animal kingdom as far as queer nature goes. Look into plants and fungi as well and dive deeper into those after the talk. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about why I created Queer is Natural. I want to dive into that just a bit more. In 2022, I started Queer is Natural because I actually have some family members that really believe that queerness is unnatural, and that's something that they kind of ascribe to and talk about a lot. And I wanted to just provide something that would give us a lot of the science that just shows that that's not true, shows that there's all sorts of ways that same-sex behavior or sex changing or gender bending appears in nature across many, many species. So that's why I created Queer is Natural, is a little bit of a clapback, I guess. And I wanted to make a note too about the word queer. I know that people have different relationships with that word. In the case of Queer is Natural, I'm using that word intentionally to really describe non-heteronormativity. So anything that diverges from what is considered to be the norm and really diverges from the binary that Western science kind of lays out for us to be true. When we know that there's a lot more gray area and nuance out there, as you'll see in this talk. But queerness and nature and this idea of queer ecology actually goes quite a lot deeper than how I've touched on it for Queer is Natural. So this person, Kate Sandilands, in 1994, she's a professor of environmental studies, introduced the term queer ecology, came out with this foundational text, which I highly recommend you dive into if you haven't already. And she was basically introducing this term as a way of breaking boundaries, as a way of challenging the concepts like wild and natural versus human, right? Recognizing the interconnectedness between human and more than human nature. She also came up with the term queering, so kind of recognizing that relationship that we have, queering our relationship with nature. I like to think about it also as really finding the lie in the lines of rigid boxes that kind of Western science and humans in general try to put everything into these rigid boxes that just aren't true for everybody or for everything. So queer ecology is about finding that lie in the lines. And it's really quite expansive. It's grown into many different fields, centering philosophy and ethics and beyond. So I just wanted to just put a little quick primer on that for you to dive in on your own time, because for Queer is Natural, it's a bit narrower, our purposes in using the word queer. So it has this expansive definition that links to queer ecology that you can check out on your own time. So queerness in the animal kingdom is actually seen in over 1,500 known species. And there's an excellent book that I have right here in my hand called Biological Exuberance by this amazing person named Bruce, who I would love to meet. This thing is thick, like it is heavy. And Bruce gave us this gift that's essentially an encyclopedia on queerness in the animal kingdom. So on things like same-sex behaviors, sex changing, gender bending, all the things you can think of across the whole animal kingdom. And he didn't just take what we have in the peer-reviewed literature and put it in this book, because again, Western science has been all about these sort of, binaries a lot of the time, and we'll get more into this. Western science has either suppressed study on homosexuality in nature or just ignored it, or, hasn't been the target of a lot of scientific studies historically. That's changing. So Bruce actually went around and found naturalists and species experts and all sorts of other folks who have worked with species for a long time and asked them about their experiences observing these behaviors and these life history strategies in nature, even if they hadn't published about it. So truly a gift. It's from 1999, so probably due for an update, but it is the best thing that we have so far. However, there are other books that have emerged relatively recently. That one in the middle there, I think just came out 2 days ago. It might be directed at kids, I'm not sure. And then Queer Ducks. I also have Queer Ducks by Elliot. This is Elliot's book. Very whimsical, very fun. So check out these books. If you don't want to read a whole encyclopedia, these are, I think, some other entry points for you. And we can always use more science on this stuff. So if you're a scientist in the room, please consider orienting your science around queerness in nature. But why is queerness natural? So, we've talked a lot about the fact that it pops up in all of these species. And there are a lot of people out there that are trying to figure out sort of the theory behind why queerness evolved in all these different taxa. So I just want to put a note here that a lot of people say it's unnatural or caused by chemicals or captivity, but that's just simply not the case according to the evidence that we have across, again, thousands of species so far. So I'm going to get into a couple of the theory papers that have come out and give you some examples of species that demonstrate these theories. Just to note, there are several other theory papers, but these are just some examples to give you the breadth of theories that are out there. So I wanted to start out with this paper by Julia Monk and colleagues. And basically in this paper, they're kind of proposing that rather than us thinking about same-sex behavior as being something unusual that evolved in an unusual way, we should think about it sort of flipped on its head. So what they're saying is that the baseline condition, that basal lineage way back in our evolutionary lineage, was probably indiscriminate sexual behavior because we couldn't tell different sexes apart. Those animals couldn't tell each other apart. So it made more sense from a fitness perspective to just have sex with everything. And then, there were these different pressures that led different species or populations into having same-sex or different sex behavior. And it just makes a lot more sense to have that be the theory, instead of having sort of different sex behavior as this baseline condition, which doesn't make as much sense when we weren't, these animals weren't necessarily able to tell the sexes apart. So on the left is a representation, this is from the paper, of how different populations can express exclusive different sex behavior or exclusive same-sex behavior, or some combination of those behaviors and their frequencies within the population. And so the authors are essentially hypothesizing that most species express a mixture of different sex behavior and same-sex behavior according to the hypothesis of ancestral indiscriminate sexual behavior. And then these populations with more different sex behavior or more same-sex behavior might have been subject to selective pressures over time. So I thought that was a really interesting one. That one came out in 2019. To sort of mix it up and show you a different end of the spectrum on theory, this is more about how behavioral plasticity or flexibility facilitates the development of same-sex sexual behavior. So they used termites as a model species for this paper. And this figure down here is showing you that, usually for the heterosexual pairs, the female is the leader, the male is the follower. They show these movement patterns that are very distinct. But termites can actually end up in these same-sex pairs, and they have a behavioral flexibility that lets them take on the roles that they're not normally doing in these heterosexual pairs. So in this case, the female would become the follower in this female-female pair, or the males would become a leader, which they're not normally doing in a hetero pair. And that behavioral flexibility sort of facilitates same-sex pairing and sexual behavior. So termites are basically figuring out how to lay that wood, regardless of what sex they're paired with. So let's highlight Japanese termites, for instance. They can go for hetero, homo, or bisexual relationships. And for instance, the female-female pairs don't actually really need a man. They reproduce by parthenogenesis, and they survive just as successfully as hetero pairs, as shown in this figure. So essentially, this is the female-female pairs in the middle, and their survival is almost as high as the female-male pairs, compared to females that just, try parthenogenesis alone. They actually need to be in those pairs to survive. As for males, sometimes, a couple of these guys are lumbering around looking for females, and they kind of give up when it's too much energy or there's a high predation risk, and they establish a nest with each other. So they can still temporarily leave their boyfriends and go spread their genes with females and then return to their nest. But the thing is, as a termite, you're going to survive a lot longer if you're in a homosexual pair than if you're single, because termite pairs can help each other, say, avoid infections by grooming one another. This is called allogrooming. So it's really advantageous for them to be in these same-sex pairs rather than being alone. Our next theory paper, this was noted in your quiz. So a group of authors from Spain last year essentially looked at how same-sex sexual behavior evolved in mammals. So what they found, and this chart is showing you, is that same-sex sexual behavior evolved many different times across different mammal lineages. And that kind of runs a little counter to Monk et al.'s theory, but just for mammals in particular. And as we mentioned in your quiz, this evolution of same-sex sexual behavior was more likely to pop up in species that are more social. They're interacting more. Those interactions really matter. So there's no real surprise there. So for instance, compared to evolutionarily older taxa, hominids, which includes non-human primates and us, are more likely than expected to display same-sex sexual behavior. And that's definitely linked to the intense levels of sociality in hominids. And we're going to get right into it with a species that came up in your quiz that gives the best illustration of this sociality and the same-sex sexual behavior. Our bonobos, right? So this is one of the most sexual non-human species. So here we start with our R-rated images, and they don't discriminate about who they have sex with. So males will mount females. Females sometimes mount them back. Females will be with females. Males will be with males. Females have a lot of sex with one another in particular. They sometimes even prefer same-sex sexual behavior over different sex sexual behavior. So they do all sorts of things. They kiss with tongue. They have oral sex. They even make sex toys, which is incredible. And of course, they're doing this for pleasure, but they are also doing this in some cases to ease tension, right? So if there's something that they could be competing against, like a food source, or competing with each other against, then instead of competing with each other, they're going to have sex, have lots of sex, and be like, this is great. Let's just eat. Let's share. This is fantastic. The other thing, as a bonus, we mentioned female bonobos are usually the ones in charge. They have all the power. It's, with sex or with any other social interaction, which is unusual for primates. And maybe it's time for, human society to learn something from bonobos. Okay, so I'm also going to be busting some myths during this talk. So there are several myths I want to bust. And the first one I want to bust is that same-sex sexual behavior only happens to animals in captivity. So I've included some examples of some great animals in captivity for which they were having same-sex sexual behavior, but this is actually a myth. It happens all over the wild. But first, let me just tell you about these fun pairs. So on the left are Manny and Cayenne, who are male anteaters currently living at the National Zoo, the Smithsonian. If you want to go see them, they are lovebirds. And in the center are these brown bears at a sanctuary in Croatia that were giving each other a lot of fellatio. That was their thing. They were having a good time. And then I think we've all heard various stories about all of the gay and lesbian penguins in different places in captivity. I really liked this particular headline of the gay male penguins at a Dutch zoo stealing eggs from a lesbian penguin couple, which of course were infertile, but actually when there are fertile eggs that are given to same-sex penguin pairs, they do raise them successfully. So there are lots of instances in captivity, yes, but they are, very much in the wild. There are so many animals that show same-sex sexual behavior. And since we're talking about penguins, we might as well talk about penguins in the wild. So we can't not talk about Adelie penguins. Adelie penguins and king penguins and maybe other species of penguin have been shown to have lots of same-sex sexual behaviors in the wild, especially among males. And there's a really interesting backstory about Adelie penguins and this behavior that I think gets into this bit again about Western science sort of suppressing this knowledge. So there's this guy, George Levick, who was an explorer in the Antarctic and in other regions around there. And he came across Adelie penguins and saw them having lots and lots of homosexual sex with each other. And he was just completely scandalized by it. And in fact, he said, here's a quote from him, there are many other fantastic, awful quotes from George Levick, but there seems to be no crime too low for these penguins. And in fact, he was so scandalized by all of these taboo behaviors that he kind of buried this information. He wrote it down in Greek and hid it away in a museum somewhere until folks translated it, because it was so societally taboo. So that gives you a sense, if you're not a scientist, science is a really important institution, Western science, but it's actually like, very much influenced by culture, how we choose to study things, which topics we choose to study, how information gets disseminated is very culturally based, because science is tied to culture. And this is a great example of that. Okay, myth number 2, same-sex behavior only happens when there aren't enough members of the opposite sex. This is not true, and we're going to get into that in a second, but I had to include this picture of bighorn sheep who can be, super gay in their all-male herds, which they spend most of their year with. And I really like this example of bighorn sheep because they're kind of, in USA culture, they're seen as this very like masculine, manly, like red-blooded American kind of animal, right? Like Dodge Ram, like all of these ways that the media portrays bighorn sheep, but actually they're kind of having these, and they're, very masculine and majestic, but they are having these like intensely homosexual relationships, the males, for most of the year. So that's just a fun fact. However, again, it is a myth that these same-sex behaviors happen when there are not enough members of the opposite sex. We can look at whales and dolphins as a great example of this. So non-conceptive sexual behavior, like same-sex behavior, has been observed in at least 35 of 87 living whale and dolphin species, cetacean species. So they have sex for pleasure or for play or for social bonding and communication. And while most observations of this have happened in toothed whales, so things like dolphins and sperm whales, baleen whales also get in on the action. So baleen being like, humpback whales, fin whales, right whales, that kind of thing. So just to give you some examples of this, bisexual behavior is not a fluke in bottlenose dolphins. So most males actually bond sexually and otherwise with other males, possibly for life. Spinner dolphin females have been known to insert their beaks into each other's genital slits and propel each other around, a very interesting and kinky way of, masturbating each other. And baleen whales, it's kind of interesting because, this is a great example of something that I think is fascinating, which is a bisexual threesome, essentially. These are right whales engaging in same-sex tactile sexual activity with like another whale sort of watching and having a good time. And then y'all might have heard of, humpback whales. It's been really hard to get any footage whatsoever to observe humpbacks having sex at all, hetero or otherwise, until I think it was earlier this year. You might have seen it in the news. The very first observation of humpback whale sexual activity was actually seen in a male same-sex pair. Okay, so when I am looking up these different things and reading about all this science, sometimes I come across some really funny, whimsical things in papers, and I wanted to share one with you, one of my faves. This was from a paper about beluga whales in captivity having these male-male sexual relationships. And I have discovered the word thrusty, which is enhancing my life so much. So they have the thruster and the thrusty. And I hope that y'all, and you didn't get this advice from me, but I hope that y'all all find a way to include the word thrusty in your daily vocabulary, because it is just absurd. I'm personally afraid that I'm going to be writing a professional email with the word trusty and accidentally write thrusty. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, new fear unlocked. Love that word. Okay, moving on. So more animals that for which they do not kind of wait around to have same-sex sexual behavior just because there aren't others of the opposite sex around. A good example is flying foxes. So for several flying fox species, scientists have documented quite a lot of interesting sexual behavior. So first of all, flying foxes seem to do quite a lot of oral sex. And just to like give you a little bit of example of some other things that they like to do, like foreplay, right? The Indian flying fox pictured here, males perform cunnilingus on females, actually increases the duration of copulation. So it is basically foreplay, but back to the same-sex sexual behavior. And another species that I think is fantastically called the bone-in flying fox, because they be bone-in. The males form clusters where they have oral sex with one another. Those are what you think they are. A very, very explicit picture. And all of this is happening upside down, which is really impressive. So one scientist proposed that these kind of orgies of male flying foxes could be a way of cooperating with potential competitors. And what's really interesting, again, about these flying fox orgies or foreplay orgies is that they can go on 4 hours at a time. So a lot of stamina. Another example of a species for which they do not need to have same-sex sexual behaviors just because the other sex is not around are ones that we know quite well, domestic cattle. So I'm going to talk a bit more about cattle than the other two species I just talked about. I'm going to milk it for all it's worth. So the homosexual behaviors of cattle are so widely documented that the livestock industry has like a stake in them. These behaviors are actually used in a few different ways in livestock production and husbandry. Before I jump into the behaviors themselves, I just want to include this very interesting headline. So the previous president of Tanzania, Magufuli, said in 2017, so he was trying to basically crack down on LGBTQIA rights. And he said, those who teach such things do not like us. They brought us drugs and homosexual practices that even cows disapprove of. So aside from that being a very weird and unsettling statement, it's actually just straight up wrong, right? So cows are hecka queer. Like they show a lot of different behaviors. And I'm only going to get into a couple of the behaviors right now around same-sex behavior, but there are way more than this. So for the females, cows will actually mount each other when they're in heat. They'll do pelvic thrusting. They'll display some other sort of behaviors like licking each other's genitals or chin resting and these other sexual behaviors. And cattle producers will use these behaviors to know when a cow might be ready for something like artificial insemination or ready for a bull to be brought in. So they're actually looking out for these same-sex sexual behaviors for the husbandry of the animal. But even when they're congregated in groups of both sexes, these ladies actually gather together in all lady groups and mount one another. They can end up in lines of like 4 or more cows mounting each other. And they also will reject males that court them, sometimes for many hours or even completely, in favor of being with their ladies. So, sometimes when you're in the mood, you know what you want. However, it's not just exclusive to the ladies. Bulls also mount each other. And this happens even when they have different levels of hormones or even when they're infertile. And it's also really important for livestock husbandry. So, for instance, it can be important for artificial insemination. If they're mounting their companion or something that looks like another bull, then you can use this. Yes, this is an artificial cow vagina on the upper right side to collect the semen and thereby avoid unwanted pregnancies or disease transmission and that kind of thing. And bulls, back to sort of the expansiveness of queerness, there have been a number of different experiments to see why bulls might do this. And it kind of, they did one experiment, for instance, where they were looking at bulls with more masculinized body types and with more feminized body types. And it was actually the female body bulls that mounted the male body bulls more frequently. So just turning everything on its head. And they haven't really figured out how to predict which bulls will mount other bulls. It could just be individual preference, just like it is for us. And then the last theory kind of paper I wanted to bring in was we've talked about animals that have same-sex sexual behavior or they have different bisexual kind of tendencies. But this person, Paul Vasey, who's a Japanese macaque expert, and he also studies some other species, really wanted to know and kind of interrogate the idea of, are there animals that have same-sex preferences? Like they're going to prefer a same-sex sexual encounter over a different sex sexual encounter. And he had this whole long paper, which is cited right here, where he was trying to see, okay, like I've come up with, I think it was 4 or 5 different species where I think this could be the case. And here are all the reasons why I think this scientifically. And this is just a picture of Japanese macaques on the right. And the females like to mount each other and pair up and have all these lovely relationships. And so the thing I really liked about this paper that I found quite funny and very just true to science is that you don't have to read all this, but this is basically like Paul spent all this time laying out for Japanese macaques all the reasons that like leading into why he thinks these female-female relationships might be something that they prefer over female-male relationships. And in the end, he gets to this point saying some same-sex sexual partners might be preferred over certain opposite-sex alternatives simply because females derive more sexual gratification during interactions with them. So basically, he laid out all this stuff, and the answer is they just like it. They're just having a good time, you know? And so he's saying, okay, like, while we can look at how this evolved over time, it right now, looking at why it's there, the answer is just it feels good, which I absolutely love. I loved reading that in the scientific context. I think that paper was from 2002. Feel free to check it out. It's very interesting. Okay, so we've talked a lot about same-sex sexual behavior, and I just wanted to pivot into intersex animals. Intersex animals, arguably, from what we understand, make up, a vast majority of this kind of queerness in the animal kingdom. And there's all different varieties of intersexuality in animals. So I wanted to just give you a few examples. So the first example, local to the Bay Area, banana slugs. I know many of y'all are fond of them. And so they are intersex. They have both male and female genitalia, and the mating process can be really intense. Actually, I think Post has perhaps a harrowing video of banana slug mating that you can check out. It might be linked into the chat at some point. And most of the time, they actually inseminate each other. So both slugs will inseminate each other. Everybody wins. If you're intersex, everybody gets what they need. And they copulate for hours at a time. Side note here that banana slug penises come out of the genital pore on their head. And the penis is huge. It can be up to the same length of the body of the animal. So sorry, guys, but they've got you beat. So the other weird thing about banana slugs, just to throw in a little kink here, is that they are whipping each other and doing all this like very violent stuff during this process. And then at the end, they sometimes bite each other's penises off entirely. Scientists don't really know why. It could be either because the penises get stuck or because they're trying to make their partner less appealing to future mates. So it's still a mystery. Another example of intersex animals we got into in the quiz. So the white-tailed deer, they buck gender norms, as I like to say. So nearly 15% of white-tailed deer are born intersex, and it's not just the velvet horns. So there can be deer with both male and female sex organs. There can be females that grow antlers, and of course the velvet horns that are born with male characteristics, but never lose that velvet covering their antlers that we talked about in the beginning. And they have more feminine bodies as adults. So they can sometimes also make their own exclusively velvet horn groups. And they sometimes have been shown to adopt orphan fawns, Bambi, this is the Bambi deer, and kind of, help out their populations that way. So again, they're showing us the different ways that families can happen. And one of the most interesting things about all of this is that even the hunting community knows all about queer deer. So some states have it in their policies to label their hunting tags as antlered or antlerless rather than male or female to avoid any confusion, which I think is amazing. So I included this headline that I loved, although I was sad that this deer died, of course. That's awful. I'm not a hunter, but hunting is important for different reasons. We don't have to get into that. So this says gender bending deer with crazy antlers shot. And so this female deer with antlers had 30-point antlers, essentially massive antlers, larger than your average healthy male deer in his prime. So she is just the most badass deer ever. And I just love that idea of gender bending, even in this kind of, very red-blooded American setting of hunting. I would be remiss if I did not include fish in my intersex animals examples. We all know about clownfish, I think, at this point. So clownfish are all born male, and they can change sex to female. So there are actually over 450 fish species in general, probably more than that exhibit what's called functional hermaphrodism. That's a scientific term. It's also called sequential hermaphrodism, what I'm about to describe. So clownfish usually live in small groups of several non-breeding males, as well as a breeding dominant male and female. And when the female dies, the dominant male actually changes sex to become the female. And then the next largest male becomes the new breeding male. So it's like a queuing system where like everybody knows their place. It kind of avoids these conflicts over dominance. And it's just like you line up and then you change sex over time, which of course makes you wonder about Finding Nemo, how they got that wrong, right? For those of you who live under a rock, I'm so sorry for the spoiler, but Nemo's mom dies in the beginning of the movie. So I'm sorry to tell you that. And then the whole movie is about his dad, Marlin, trying to find him. But if they were doing the scientifically accurate thing, Dad Marlin should have transitioned into Mom Marlin. But, Disney can't win them all. So another example of a fish that does this kind of thing, but in the opposite direction, is the blue streak cleaner wrasse. It's a really pretty little fish that eats kind of parasites and dead tissue off of other fish, as you can see in this image. And they actually are born female. And then they transition into male. That's their sequential hermaphrodism. So normally they live in harems with a male and several females. But when the male dies, the biggest female takes his place and immediately starts kind of courting the other females, can start growing testes within a day, and then become the new big male of the group. But they kind of spice it up a little bit, the wrasses. So females will also compete with males for kind of the best bits on the fish that they're cleaning to try and grow into this bigger fish so they can eventually change sex, become the top male, have the best reproductive capacity, get those harems. So they're in this competition that's a bit more active than the clownfish showed us. And they kind of take it up even more of a notch. They have this interesting ability where if that newly minted male in a harem gets challenged by another male that's got kind of the upper edge, that newly minted male can change back into being the female, back into the female role, where she'll kind of lay low until her next chance to be the top dude. So there are a lot of benefits to staying flexible. This is the last myth that I want to bust. There's a myth out there that says that sex reversal in animals only happens because of anthropogenic, so human-caused, chemical exposure. Happens because we're doing horrible things to the environment and now all the animals are becoming, sex reversed or intersex. That is absolutely false. So a great example of that I thought was very well designed was a study on green frogs by Max Lambert and colleagues. And they essentially were like, okay, we've done these studies on sort of the effects of chemicals and other things on sex reversal in the lab, but we've never really done it across landscapes. How do we look at how different populations have sex reversed animals in really pristine, kind of untouched by people areas across a gradient of land use? That's what they did. They looked at, I think it was something like 16 or 17 different populations of green frogs across this gradient of land use from, not really used by people all the way up to heavily used by people, different chemical makeups of these ponds. And just to explain quickly what sex reversal is, it's when there's an animal that's genotypically male, and then they end up, because of factors in their environment like temperature, et cetera, they end up developing as phenotypically female, and then also the opposite. So they essentially found that there was absolutely no evidence that the presence or prevalence of intersex or sex-reversed frogs was linked to land use or chemicals. And this intersex or sex-reversed frogs were found in 75% of the populations studied here, with some populations having up to 16% intersex or sex-reversed frogs. So essentially giving us this first real robust evidence that no, this is not caused by people. This is something that's naturally occurring for these species. And the neat thing is that sex reversal, particularly genetic males who become phenotypically female, can likely boost genetic diversity in various species by allowing the Y chromosome to recombine and create healthier versions of itself, ensuring maybe for these frogs that the population doesn't grow. I have to include other animals that gender bend. There are some great examples. And I just want to note here, I don't think I said this in the beginning, I'm literally touching just the tip of the iceberg on all of this. So I'm sorry if I'm not getting to your favorite animal. I'm also an enthusiast of these things, not necessarily an expert on all of these things, only on some of them. So that's something that I think we can all kind of dive in on our own time to all the ones that I'm missing. So gender bending animals. I want to include garter snakes. So this is a garter snake mating ball. When snakes are trying to have snake sex, they get into these wild mating balls. The males try to access the females and get it on. But the garter snake has this fun thing some of the males do where they put out the chemicals that females would normally put out. So they're essentially dressing in drag to kind of get the other males a little bit distracted, and then they can go in and get the females. So I like the idea of kind of using these pheromones to kind of mix it up a little bit in these mating balls that can be so hectic. I also want to include the fossa, which some people know as the fossa. This is a Madagascan carnivore. It was in the movie Madagascar, pictured here. And they are really interesting. The females in particular are really interesting. So the females are born with feminized genitalia, but then when they become juveniles, they grow a pseudoscrotum and a large spiny clitoris that resembles a male penis. And they're going to retain those for a few years until they reach sexual maturity at 3 or 4 years old. They also, during that time, do a bunch of male typical things like scent marking at all different times around the year. And then when they kind of become sexually mature, they're actually kind of the dominant ones in Fusa society. So they have a lot of interesting things going on for them. And just as a scientific note, that kind of transitioning from having this female to more male, masculinized genitals and behaviors to more female features is called transient masculinization. And apparently it's present in several other species. And then I cannot miss out on telling you about spotted hyenas. So spotted hyenas are one of my main study species, and they are widely misunderstood, but they are adorable, as you can see here. Oh. And they have a lot of fun things going for them. They have a great intricate social structure that is matrilineal, so you inherit your social rank from your mom. Most of the time, all female hyenas are ranked more highly than all males in the clan because the natal males will immigrate out, leaving the sort of the high-ranking females there. They're going to have the best cuts of meat. They're going to be more dominant. They're going to be a little bigger on average. And of course, the fun stuff you want to hear about is their genitalia. So females actually have this big, huge clitoris that people who are quite prude have been calling a pseudophallus for decades and decades and decades. But it is a clitoris, and they pee, they have sex, and they give birth through their clitoris. Now, if that sounds painful, you are correct. They sometimes tear on that first birth. It's upsetting. Don't think too hard about it. But the thing is, they can control their sort of the sexual encounters that they have with males, because it's really hard to push your penis into a big clitoris that's the same size. It's really hard to tell them apart unless you know what you're looking for. This is just an example of ways to tell them apart. There are other ways to tell them apart as well. And females also, aside from this big clitoris, they have a pseudo scrotum as well. So they have this little, essentially a nutsack with no nuts in it. And I've had to teach vets when we have animals in hand, when we're putting collars on, hey, this is a female. Her nipples aren't shown because she hasn't given birth yet. And she has the pseudoscrotum, but there's nothing in it, right? There's no testes in there. So just a lot of interesting things. I could talk about them all day. I'll leave it where it is. And then this last thing I want to just bring up, since we brought it up in the quiz, is parthenogenesis. That, comes from the term virgin birth in Greek, virgin creation. And New Mexico whiptail lizards are a great example of this. The entire species is female. They reproduce with parthenogenesis. But a cool fun fact about them is that the females will still mount each other. And there was at least one study that showed that the female on the bottom of that mounting process, kind of in like the traditional female role, will end up having bigger eggs than the one on the top. So that's kind of an interesting kind of relic sexual behavior that they have. And then, as was mentioned earlier, they, rather than producing clones of themselves, they actually produce twice the number of chromosomes, and then those chromosomes get recombined just like they would with a fertilized egg. And then lastly, I just want to include earthworms, who have all sorts of stuff going for them. And they're also really, really important for us to survive on this planet. So they are intersex, they have male and female parts, and they're able to increase their populations really quickly because they both get to inseminate each other's eggs. They have this very slimy process in which everyone's eggs get fertilized by the other one's sperm, and it's this whole thing. It's very efficient. But even if they don't have access to another worm, they can, I think 40% of earthworm species can undergo parthenogenesis. So all sorts of fun queer stuff going on in the earthworm world, without which we would not survive on this planet, because they are something we rely on for our healthy soils. We're getting near to the end here. I want to include 2 bonus animals, especially because we didn't get to talk that much about birds, and birds are hecka queer. So I want to talk a little bit about threesomes. I wanted to start with the bald eagle for our threesome example. And this is in Illinois. There was this group of bald eagles that essentially, there was this whole drama where these 2 males and a female, and the female died, and the male stuck around and raised the eggs so that the eggs would still survive. And they successfully fledged the nest by raising those eggs together as like a gay male couple. But then they got another girlfriend, and she came along. Her name is Star. And as of, I think, 2019 or so, they were still sort of this throuple together. two males and a female successfully raising eggs. And I really like the idea of our symbol of patriotism, of red-blooded Americanism, can also be super, super queer and have these bisexual threesomes going on. So just had to include that. And getting into our last bit here, I'm bringing back our Western gull lore. So in the 1970s, as was mentioned, Molly Hunt, a scientist, was doing fieldwork on Santa Barbara Island in California, came across two Western gull females that were clearly a couple. And her husband didn't even believe her at first. He's also a scientist. But they did a little bit more research on it, and they found out that about 14% of the pairs on that island were female-female couples. And a telltale sign was that they had these huge clutches of eggs, these supernormal clutches that couldn't have been laid by a single female. They were able to incubate the eggs, successfully defend their territories, fledge those chicks. Sometimes they also, courted each other and mounted each other and stayed together season after season, long term. And this was actually the first highly publicized case of homosexual behavior in animals. And there were a lot of whimsical reactions in the news that I've included here, including some serious stuff like trying to get the science funding pulled in a big way because people were upset that the science funding was being used to study science, and in this case, it was just something that folks were very upset about because they thought that homosexuality was unnatural and not part of God's creation. And so it sparked this whole thing in the press, and arguably was a little bit, kind of fueling the gay rights movement, providing important additional insight for the future. So on that note, what's the big deal, right? So Queer is Natural has gotten lots of reactions, but also queer animals in general have been getting a lot of reactions even before we started this series. So for instance, you've probably heard of the book And Tango Makes Three about the penguin same-sex couple, these two males in the Central Park Zoo that got together, successfully raised a chick named Tango, who, by the way, fun fact, later on went on to have a lesbian relationship with another penguin. And this book has been banned in a lot of places. Folks just don't want to hear about the facts because they are afraid of the facts. And on that note, this is reflected more recently. This is a documentary I was in called Queer Planet. It actually comes out tomorrow on Peacock. Check it out. And people like Alex Jones and all sorts of other folks have been freaking out. They haven't even seen it yet. They just maybe read briefly a headline about it or watched the trailer. And they've decided that we are all trying to turn everybody gay. When in fact, this is a documentary just documenting queerness in the animal kingdom of all different kinds, from sex changing to gender bending to same-sex behavior. And people are really afraid of it. And I think that, it's kind of important for us to keep doing science around this, keep promoting science around this topic, because we're just stating the facts and other people are kind of giving their own tells, right? They're putting their own feet in their own mouths and getting in a huff about it when all we're doing is talking about the natural world. So I say, just keep on doing it. But I just want to put in a note here, how this connects to our society. I did create Queer is Natural as a way of clapping back against homophobes, yes. But I really don't think that we should have to demonstrate queerness in the rest of the natural world in order for every person to have guaranteed safety and equal rights and everything else, no matter who they are. This should not have to be a justification for human rights. So I just want to throw that out there. There's a lot more we can talk about in that realm, but I think I'm out of time. So just wanted to say thank you, and feel free to contact me at these places.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Christine. Chat, can we give it up for Dr. Christine's talk and give some kudos in the live chat? Dr. Christine, that was so amazing. I learned so much, and we're a little behind schedule, but I didn't want to cut you off because there's so much information, and people in the chat are loving your talk. They're also loving your puns. Don't think that they didn't notice all of that. And we're flashing some comments here that you can see. We're going to just dive straight into questions. Folks, if you got to go because it's at the hour, this recording will be posted immediately after the event is over, so you can watch it at YouTube and catch up anytime. But we're hoping a few of you can stay with us. And so let's jump into questions. Go ahead, chat, type in those questions, and I'm going to bring up some of the questions that was asked earlier during your talk. Okay, starting with this reader is asking, I read that clownfish can switch their gender in the event of another parent clownfish dying, as you mentioned with Finding Nemo. Does this happen across any other species of animals?
Yes, a lot of fish do this. So, I mentioned clownfish, but clownfish are actually, there are a bunch of clownfish species. And I mentioned one species of wrasse, but there are a bunch of wrasse species. And I think a lot, if not all of them, have this, what's called sequential hermaphrodism. I think a lot of sex changing stuff happens under the ocean in general. I'm not a marine scientist, but that's been the vibe as I've been doing this research.
Great, thank you. This viewer asked, how can you tell an animal has switched genders? Is it leftover bits? Are you looking at DNA? What is it?
Good question. I do not personally study this, but I'm pretty sure that there are different ways to study their DNA, right? Their genetics. I know that's what they were doing with the frogs, right? They were looking at the phenotypes, how the frog was presenting, and whether it had different male or female organs. I think for some of these studies, to be honest, that they do have to collect those animals, which is kind of sad. But I'm not sure if for all of them they have to. I'm sure there are external ways to tell as well for some species, but not my jurisdiction.
All right. Let's see here. I'm going through my questions. Let's see. Do fusas give birth the same way as hyenas? Do you know?
Ooh, I don't know that. But for their sake, I hope not, to be honest, because that is a traumatizing process.
Fair point. Fair point. Could you provide a list of books just off the top of your head? Can you flash those 2 books that you showed earlier?
Yeah,
or the
so
one at least?
Our textbook, Biological Exuberance. Check it out. This is, if you want something more whimsical, a book by this guy, Elliot Schrieffer. There is one that came out of the Natural History Museum of London recently that I'm forgetting exactly what it's called.
Great. Okay, we got some specific questions. Here we go. What are some examples of, I can't even say this word. How do you say this word? Andromorphism in different species.
Andromorphism in
That's
different
the typo.
species. I do not know what that word means. Let's
No
pick it
worries.
apart.
Next question. Do male and male geese pairs lose their flight feathers during mating season? Is it just if they have babies?
I also don't know that question. I am not an ornithologist, but I know there are ornithologists in the chat if they want to answer that question. I know there are several ornithologist attendees at this event.
No worries. Okay, so how about this one? Clarification. To confirm, there are species in the animal kingdom that can reproduce in queer or intersex pairs.
Yes, that is correct. So a lot of species are, that I named here that are things like mollusks or that kind of thing, or like, the slugs or the worms. They are intersex and they end up inseminating each other and kind of being more efficient in that way. Although not all intersex species will do that.
Great. What are some common backyard birds that are queered, if you know?
I'm pretty sure that the Anna's hummingbird, which is in California for y'all, the males display mating displays to each other, to males. I'm not sure if they ever mount each other, but I know that that's like a really common thing. I think that if you get this book, there's an index and you can go pretty ham on the bird section.
Great. Let's see here. We touched briefly on Japanese termites earlier. Are there any other notable examples of queer or intersex arthropods out there that you know of?
Yes, I think there are several beetles that I've read about. I don't know how to pronounce this, and I know when I say it, it's going to sound absurd, but the cockchafer beetle is a great example. There are some flower beetle species that have same-sex or indiscriminate mating. Again, I think the jury's out for some of those species, but I think it's relatively common in arthropods to pair up like that.
Great. Do you have any good resources for the genetic method of parthenogenesis in New Mexico whiptails?
I can send them to you. I've read a bunch of papers on it. I mean, there aren't a bunch of papers. I read the papers that exist that I can send out if you contact me.
All right, yeah. Flashing the the website and email here one more time so viewers have that. Okay, we're just going to take a few more questions and then we can close out. Let's see here. How is gender determined? Or if we're not really talking about gender, if it's sex, if you can clarify, because some fungi here have thousands of genders. How does that even work?
Yeah, so I think that when I talk about gender versus sex, so I am talking about sex changing a lot of the time in what I speak about for Queer is Natural. So sex changing species or sex roles or species that are intersex, these are all things that can be viewed phenotypically or genetically, like I described with the deer. But gender roles are a bit different, right? Like, so I think gender is a human construct personally. But I do know some scientists who, basically place, for especially I'd say for social species, that will start to call like the things that typical cis males do to be things that are like in a cultural gender role for that species. I don't know exactly where I fall on that. I think that's something that's really the jury's out on because we've hardly, as scientists, begun to even study this stuff on a large scale, let alone create language around it. But I prefer to talk about things as sex changing, intersex, demonstrating genotypic or phenotypic sex traits, etc.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. All right. My last question here is, how can we increase awareness and visibility of queerness in nature?
Yeah, I mean, I recommend just going out, reading the books that exist, trying to, if you're a scientist, do more science around it. I do want to just also make a note here because I'm seeing in the chat some very volatile arguments about the word queer. And I mentioned at the top of my talk, I'm not sure if everyone saw it, but when I'm talking about the word queer, I'm talking about it in the context of queer ecology. Feel free to look up the term queer ecology if you're unfamiliar with it. Essentially everything that breaks out of the norm, out of the binary, out of the boxes that we have been given that are heteronormative, is kind of this realm of queer ecology that's a bit more nuanced. So we're using that for all the different elements of things that break out of what we've heard is the norm in the animal kingdom. And we would just love to have more data about it. So if you're a scientist, please study it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Christine. That ends our Q&A. And before we say goodbye, I just want to do a lightning recap for the audience members here because we just absorbed so much information. And let me know if I got this right. So one of the few books that you recommend is Biological Exuberance by Bruce. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but you can scrub the recording later to find that, as well as Queer Ducks. Queer behavior is documented in over 1,500 species and not just in captivity. We busted 3 myths here. Number 1, same-sex behavior does not only happen in captivity. Same-sex behavior does not happen when there aren't enough members of the opposite sex. And sex reversal only happens because of chemical exposure, which is not true. So, and then you listed so many examples of queer behavior from bonobos, bears, penguins, bighorn sheep, flying foxes, spotted hyenas, fish, frogs, snakes, even earthworms, bald eagles, and so much more. And even the hunting community recognizes gender-bending white-tailed deer with labeling them antlered and versus antlerless. So much interesting stuff. Chat, can you just join me in giving Dr. Christine another big thank you and kudos in the chat? We really appreciated you being here tonight. Dr. Christine, any last words for our audience that you want to share?
Yeah, I'll just again promote Queer Planet. Comes out tomorrow on Peacock. It's streaming. I don't know how long we'll have it on there. And it's a nice whimsical take on some things. I don't know, kind of a comedy on queer nature. And if you would like to contact me or kind of follow along as I make more Queer is Natural videos, feel free to check out my social media.
Yeah, check out their internet website at scrappynaturalist.com. Follow them at TikTok at The Scrappy Naturalist, as well at Christine Eleanor on Instagram. All right, Dr. Christine, thank you again. Let's take a quick picture. We'll take a screenshot of this and smile in 3, 2, 1. Great. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you later, Dr. Christine.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for coming.
But wait, folks, don't go anywhere. We have a few more important announcements if you like tonight's event. First is check out our free events. We have hikes, walks, in-person events, online events, volunteer work days, and so much more. Visit openspacetrust.org/events. If you want to go queer birding with us, we host this event called Queers of a Feather. The next one is next Saturday. Unfortunately, we are full because the early bird gets the worm and so many people flock to this event. So sign up on our email list. You'll be sure to not miss this event the next time it comes around. If you want to go hiking, don't really know where to go, or you want to go look at wildflowers, check out our field guides by scanning this code or visiting our website below. And lastly, if you like tonight's event, let us know. We want to know. Fill out this survey by scanning this code or clicking on the link in the chat, and let us know what you liked. Did you like the game show? What kind of topics did you want to see for next time? And what was your favorite part about Dr. Christine's talk? I really appreciate you being here. Once again, my name is Megan Lynn. It's been a pleasure being your host tonight. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Hey, fill it out. Scan that code. See ya.